We have one final speaker, and Don, you're going to stay afterwards, aren't you? Will you be able to stay after, Anna? Okay, so if you have questions, they'll be here after the talk. Dr. Maurer is our final speaker, and he teaches mindfully based stress reduction, or MBSR, and other mindfully based programs at the Susan Samueli Center for Integrative Medicine and other places in Orange County. And he's going to talk to us today about yoga and other traditional movement practices to calm the mind and improve our strength, flexibility, balance, and attention. Give him a big hand.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Anna. Great talk. All right, let me see if the first mindful movement that I can accomplish here is getting on. Can you hear me? All right. Can you hear me? All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right. All right. So I'd like to talk with you today about mindful movement and its role in stress reduction, health, and really healing and optimal performance. So let's just start from the beginning, if you like, with some mindful movement. And if you'd like to stand up. How was that? Just paying attention, noticing when your mind wanders and bringing it back to the present moment. Breathing in and stretching up. And then slowly letting your arms float down, exhaling. Letting go. Noticing what that feels like. And then bringing your arms up again. Breathing in. Stretching. And letting go. Bringing your arms up. Stretching up. And then stretching over to your right. Just noticing where you're feeling that stretch. Distorting your connective tissue, as Dr. Lynn explained. And then coming back up and breathing over to the side. And then coming back up and stretching over again to the right. And breathing over to the left. smiling, coming back up, and letting your arms come back down. And just standing, noticing what that feels like. And when you're ready, having a seat. Okay. Clicker, pointer. All right. All right.
And so when you're doing the click, you want to make sure you're pointing towards the table at the top right there.
Okay. Is it? Okay. So, yoga, meditation, mindful movement, fight or flight, stress, disease, mindfulness and healing, optimal health and performance. This is about paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. We talked about Tai Chi, Qigong, movement as moving meditation. Well, meditation is really the formal practice of cultivating moment-to-moment attention, this awareness that is at the core of our being, who we are, what we are. Being more focused in the present moment. And yoga and other forms of mindful movement are merely formal practices of this thing that we call mindfulness. Meditation, a formal practice of this thing that we call mindfulness. The opposite of mindfulness is mindlessness, or just being absent-minded. And it turns out, the researchers show, this was an interesting study done back in 2010 by researchers at Harvard who asked people to carry in their smartphone to answer an app when they buzzed, that asked them, what are you doing? Are you mindful of what you're doing? Are you paying attention? Is your mind actually on it, or is it wandering? And are you happy or are you unhappy doing what you're doing, mindful or not? And it turned out that their minds were wandering about 50% of the time, no matter what it was. But one of the interesting parts of the study was that the people whose minds were on what they were doing, whether it was mundane tasks or not, were generally happier than people who were having pleasant thoughts about being somewhere else, unpleasant thoughts, or neutral thoughts. So the investigators concluded that a human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And this comes at a cognitive cost. And I'd like to propose to you that that is not only a cognitive cost, but a physiologic cost, and that we really normally term this as related to stress and the costs of stress in terms of their effect on disease, on health and illness. So, in the ancestral environment, as you all know, we've evolved with the fight or flight response, which is, here's some mindful movement, by the way, and here's mindful movement of a different kind, which engages the fight or flight response, this sympathetic outburst, releasing adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, a host of hormones and nervous system transmitters which are designed to help us stay alive. Gerald Jampolsky wrote a book called, he's a neuroscientist at Stanford, if you know him, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the title is kind of indicates what happens with most animals. They don't, when the stress is over, they've survived or not surviving, they return to a more what we would call parasympathetic state, resting, relaxing, grazing, calm, content. It's called versus fight or flight, rest and digest. But oftentimes in our modern environment, we don't really return to this peaceful, calm state. It's more about one thing after another keeping up this stress level and these stress hormones and neurotransmitters, which keep the body both and in this sense, the mind-body in a state of agitation. In a sense, perhaps you know someone like this who represents the study that we talked about earlier. And although it's, it really brings together a lot of things. But the interesting thing about the studies and the stress and who we are as human beings is that more or less each of these wandering states of mind, perhaps for this guy, I don't know, but in many of us represents a kind of a low-level stress, which is connected with those fight or flight hormones and that sympathetic nervous system discharge, which leads to what scientists describe as stress signaling pathways in the brain. And basically, these are coming up from the amygdala and lower brain centers, which put us on a hypervigilant kind of a stance of attitude, perspective, and looking at the world, and which drops the frontal cortexes where the decision-making ability, emotional regulation, the kinds of nuances of what makes these great computers that we have highly efficient and functional, which robs them of their executive capacity. This fight or flight stress situation in a chronic kind of condition, well, this is both the acute, what happens acutely when there's a sympathetic discharge, and the adrenaline and the cortisol are coursing through our systems with multiple effects throughout the whole organism, which you weren't supposed to see that one yet, which lead to the stress reaction, the hormones release, the physiologic response. When it becomes chronic, leads to diseases of stress that are well recognized, including both physical and physiological and psychological illnesses, anxiety, depression, headaches, chronic pain, high blood pressure, dysrhythmias, circulatory, respiratory problems, with eventual breakdown in the organism. In addition to the kind of normal processes of wear and tear that are happening, there's maladaptive coping, including overworking, overeating, alcohol, drugs, you name the compulsion. And most of us know that it's better to be in the moment, to be mindful of what we're doing. But oftentimes there's a reason the mind, as Dr. Halbeson said, has a mind of its own sometimes, and it kind of leads us to thinking something else would be better, some other place would be better. I like this, I don't like that. So it's time for a breath. If you like, close your eyes. Or with eyes open, simply take a deep breath and let it out, and notice what it feels like. And once again, and again. So what happens when we begin to pay attention and pay attention to this mind-body. We have awareness of what's happening with our mind-body connection, this being that we are in, this body. We can begin to make better decisions about what we're doing, what we're thinking, how we're responding, and indeed, as we'll show, actually begin to move that energy out of these stress areas of the amygdala and the lower brain centers. And this is obviously reducing a lot of rather complex neuroscientific talk up into these higher brain centers, where we actually begin to better recognize that we have options and to responding appropriately. And what are the mindful strategies? How do we begin to actually employ these mindful strategies to deal with this mind wandering, which is often involved with the rather stressful part of dissatisfaction, which is just the way the mind operates. So the course that I teach and how I began to learn all this some years ago, although I first started meditation back as a medical student, back in the dinosaur ages, before anybody knew anything really, and practiced it off and on, and began to learn yoga myself out of a book because there weren't any yoga instructors available a few years later. I began having some chronic health problems. I was working in the emergency room for 30 years, and as Jon Kabat-Zinn, experiencing the full catastrophe. And one of my physicians suggested that I look into this course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which he began at the University of Massachusetts Medical School back in 1979. Essentially taking the wisdom of the ancient meditation mindfulness traditions for relieving suffering and stress into a modern medical setting, beginning working with patients who the health system and the physicians could no longer help. This class is now taught worldwide in leading medical centers worldwide as an 8-week course, meeting once weekly, and then one full 6-hour course to put everything together. And it consists of training in mindfulness. Just that, training what it is, and what it means to be mindful. And a lot of that course, a lot of this course, is based on mindful movement, yoga primarily, but also walking. And there's really no distinction, as we'll see, in meditation, whether it's called yoga, whether it's called sitting meditation, walking meditation, qigong, tai chi, in terms of how it's referencing this thing about training the attention, knowing where your attention is, but with a particular way, attitude, which is basically non-judgmentally. And that is a very, that's the kicker. How do you do this at the same time with not being judgmental? I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. How do we begin to recognize how we're toiling under those kinds of autonomic or automatic reactions that the brain is registering continuously? So, what the course is about and what I would propose to you, mind-body medicine is about, is that there really is no separation in mind-body. This is a construct of our thinking, that this is a unified, that they are not two, and that yoga, which as you know from Sanskrit, means unity or unifying, union, the mind-body, unifying the individual with their true nature, that this is really about this awareness, developing this awareness of really our true nature, what it is that we are as human beings. Jon Kabat-Zinn wrote it this way in 2003. He and a friend one was teaching yoga and one was teaching meditation. We saw yoga and meditation as different but complementary doors into what is ultimately the same room, namely learning how to live wisely. Only the view from the doorways was different. The integration of meditation and yoga taps into the innate potential for healing that we all have. And through 30 years of research, which began really back in those early days in the 70s into mindfulness meditation, has begun to generate a very sophisticated map of how the brain is responding to the things Dr. Lin was talking about, what Dr. Halbeson was talking about, this integration of the mind-body in movement, in meditation, in mindfulness. This is a paper, if any of you are interested in, I'd really suggest that you look at. It's called Mindfulness Starts with the Body. And it really talks about how the science is beginning to come together in a unified theory, in the evidence of how mindfulness is actually working in moving the energy with which we think, work, act to these higher brain centers and help and involve this higher discriminatory function and capacity, at the same time increasing our capacity for and the ability for recruiting these inner healing resources. So over time, and this is an old slide through 2010, the peer-based articles or peer-reviewed articles on mindfulness and meditation have increased exponentially. And these bars would really be off the graph now in terms of the research which is coming out showing clinical research in mindfulness, and it's not just MBSR, but MBSR is the gold standard the NIH recognizes in mindfulness research, shows consistent and reliable benefits in a range of medical and psychological illnesses, and increases in healthy individuals in performance and well-being, basic science research, strengthening of the immune system, growth in positive brain structures, and improvement in stress biomarkers. This is just a report of one study that came out in 2011 showing growth in an 8-week period of course. After an 8-week course, this is MBSR, growth in areas of the brain associated with memory, sense of self, empathy, executive decision making. So this news is catching on, that mindfulness is a good thing, whether it's done in meditation or mindful movement, from professional athletes to the military to children in education, through all ages of education, through all areas of the society. The image, the picture that's coming down through the neuroscience in, 30 years of investigation, but it's really been the last 10, is showing how mindfulness and mindful movement and the kinds of practices which actually help us to become familiar with our bodies, to inhabit our bodies, to know directly, experience this mind-body connection, move this nerve energy, the way the brain functions, into the higher cortical levels, where reality testing, error measuring, top-down guidance of attention, all of these things begin to help us to make better decisions and to live more healthy and actually to be healthier, tapping in to these inner resources for healing that we all have, that we each have. And this slide touches on some of the, that's a powerful slide, that we kind of live aware of the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of these various things that are going on, whether you describe them from the point of view of Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, Indian medicine, from traditional medicine or Western medicine, from a neuroscientific point of view, physiologic point of view, a psychological point of view, all becoming much more specifically defined in how this mind-body map is being understood, and why mindfulness and mind-body exercises, such as Dr. Lin was talking about, are so important in our health. So let's just take a moment. One of the things I recall listening to Dr. Lin is when I first tried Tai Chi some 20 years ago, I couldn't do it. I mean, it looks easy, but I had bad knees, and they got worse, and every time I tried it, I couldn't do that particular thing. And this was the first time I had tried it since my knee replacements last year, that I was actually able to do and enjoy Tai Chi. So it was a really nice experience. But one of the things about yoga, which I was able to do all the way up to the point where I got my knee replacements and then soon after, is that it can be done in whether you're standing, moving, sitting. So I'd invite you just to take a deep breath, put your hands on your knees, feet on the floor. We'll do this pose, asana, called the cat-cow. So just sitting upright, and then coming forward, then exhalation, stretching forward, bending, head down, and then head coming up, shoulders, chest coming up, breathing in, arching the back, and then breathing out, head coming down, bending forward, pelvis tilting back. Then breathing in, head coming up, shoulders back, abdomen arched forward, stretching, deforming your connective tissue, and then returning to an upright position, noticing how that feels. Just being with this experience. And now twisting, moving your left hand to your right knee, and then your right hand, wherever it's comfortable, on the side of your chair or your hip. Then with the shoulders turning, moving, looking over your right shoulder and breathing. And then slowly coming back around, moving your hand to your other knee, looking over your left shoulder, and breathing. And then returning to sitting, noticing your posture, and then with eyes open or closed, just notice what it feels like to be sitting here. Just breathing. Perhaps noticing the sense of contact of your feet to the floor, your bottom to the chair, the breath coming and going wherever you feel it most vividly. Just being here in this breathing body. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. Just being here. So this is a representation of the body by the New York, exploring different visions of the human body. Of course, the Western vision, the nervous system, the circulatory system, and the Eastern view of the energy circulating through the meridians, or in Chinese medicine, or in Indian medicine, the nadis, the life energy, prana. But whatever way you look at it, the taking time to get to know this body, this being in the moment, is good for your health. It's good for your outlook. And I just like to invite you, even if it's only for a few minutes a day, or if you're sitting at your desk, 1 or 2 breaths, to just sit and be with whatever form of the map that you have of this amazing body that we have all got to enjoy. Thank you.
Another hand to Dr. Maurer. So I hope you're all feeling peaceful and mindful. Did you enjoy it?